It's a pleasure to have Tom Kelly join me on Good Morning NFC East. Quick 12-hour turnaround, TK. I was just on WIP last night for you.
Yep. Yeah, Jeff, quick turnaround from last night. Back on tonight, so busy couple days here.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. By the way, you let Dave Uram off the hook with that little egg. What was it? A crack on the head? I thought you were going to slam him with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of people are telling me, and they're right. I mean, I let him off the hook. I didn't slam the egg hard enough. First time I've ever done it to somebody. So, yeah, I probably could have been a little more aggressive slamming that thing down on his head. And that's what he deserved for picking the Giants. So I definitely would like to have that one over again if I could.
What was Dave's reason for picking them?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know why he picked the Giants. I thought it was a pretty ridiculous pick at the time. And, I think in general, Jeff, I think it was an overreaction that a lot of people had to the way the Eagles played at the end of the season. I think most people overreacted to what we saw the last couple of weeks when we knew that wasn't really what this Eagles team was the majority of the season with Jalen Hurts. And, I think even I overrated that to a degree. I mean, I picked the Eagles to beat the Giants by a touchdown when if you really looked at the way these teams played this year, the Eagles, were a far better team. And they showed that in a big way last Saturday night.
You weren't the only one to think that, though. I was working with people at CBS, and they were saying the same thing. Like, oh, this Giants team's better. And look how the Eagles finished down the stretch. I'm like, well, is it the Eagles' fault they were 13-1? Is that what we're doing here? And I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just fell into that trap of, oh, the Giants are red hot, when in reality they were 3-5-1 their last night.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, I thought the Eagles were going to win that game, and I thought the Eagles were going to win it rather handily. I thought it was a situation where, in the end, the score maybe looks closer than the game actually is. But I mean, that game was just a complete train wreck for the Giants, and I think it showed what we should have seen and what's been evident. That's the Eagles are the far better team than the Giants this season. The Eagles are the best team in the NFC. And, they came out and they showed it. And that was an incredibly impressive performance. And I would say a near perfect performance from the Eagles last week.
I'm getting a little upset at the narrative going out in San Francisco because I tweeted yesterday, well, the Eagles are 6-0 against playoff teams this year when Jalen Hurts starts. And San Francisco people did not like that stat. They go, whoa, that's skewed because they're 3-0 against the Giants. They weren't any good. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, hold on a second. They went to the divisional round of the playoffs. Are we going to shortchange that now?
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting when you look at it and especially from San Francisco, because look at what that division was this year. And what's really interesting about it is, the NFC East had 3 teams from this division make the playoffs, and you can argue about how good the Giants and the Cowboys were, but that's what the NFC West was supposed to be this year. The NFC West was supposed to be the division in the NFL that was one of the best, and obviously the Rams season went off the rails. The Cardinals season was a complete disaster. They were able to get Seattle in, but that division as a whole was much worse. So I don't think that argument from the San Francisco side of things, especially, really adds up.
What upset me about the NFC West this year was, because I agree with you, I thought going in that was going to be the best division in football. And the Rams, I don't think they cared the last 6-7 weeks of the year. I think the Cardinals kind of gave up midseason. I think they knew the fate of Cliff Kingsbury, and once Kyler Murray tore his ACL, that was it. So the 49ers got a gift there, but also the team, like even the good teams they beat, like I thought their win against the Chargers was impressive. I thought their win against the Dolphins was impressive, but yet those 2 teams didn't even feel as good as the Giants late in the year.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, when you look at the strength of schedule overall, I mean, the Eagles playing in this division, I think, does play into it, because even a team like Washington was competitive in the end. So, yeah, I think from that perspective, for San Francisco, you can't talk about the schedule. You had these, games against the Rams, games against the Cardinals, which were against teams that weren't playing for a lot, especially the Niners played the Cardinals the final week of the year, in which the Cardinals were a complete disaster at that point. So, yeah, I think it's surprising, but the NFC East as a whole ended up being the much better division this year.
Do you think the 49ers are getting disrespected at all?
Do I think they're getting disrespected? Not really. I mean, I think people are showing the Niners a proper amount of respect. I'm picking I think the Eagles probably win this game convincingly this week, but that's not about the 49ers. Like, I think when you look at this game, I don't think that it's necessarily about the 49ers and disrespecting them. It's about giving proper respect to the Eagles. And the bottom line is, when Jalen Hurts has been on the field this year, the Eagles are 14-1. They're the best team in the NFC, clearly. And, regardless of what the 49ers are, I would feel good about the Eagles' chances to beat pretty much anybody right now.
I think I said this to you on WIP last night. When I just keep breaking down this game, and the Eagles do have some advantages here, but at the end of the day, the real advantage is the Eagles have a top 5 quarterback, and the 49ers don't.
Yeah, I mean that's really the heart of the issue. And you look, Jeff, I mean, look at the other 3 teams playing this weekend compared to the 49ers. I mean, you have Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, probably the guys who are going to go 1, 2, 3 in the MVP voting. And then you have Brock Purdy. And it's nothing against Brock Purdy. He's done a good job. He has done what the 49ers have asked him to do. He's done a nice job running that offense. But there are different levels here when you look at the quarterbacks on those other 3 teams, what those quarterbacks have done compared to Brock Purdy. And I think when you look at that fact, that's a really big deal. And that's one that can't be discounted here. And the Eagles have a massive advantage when you look at the quarterback spot.
I think I'm trying to word this as best I can here. I said this to you last night, but the one thing I learned from the 49ers Cowboys game last week was I wanted to see Brock Purdy against an actual pass rush, not the Washington Commanders pass rush, not the Seattle Seahawks lack of a pass rush, the Cowboys pass rush. I thought Dan Quinn did a pretty good job of getting to him. And they should have had 2 interceptions if you think about it. Like Trayvon Diggs shot that 1 pick. But Brock Purdy was 3 for 11 for 24 yards against the Cowboys pass rush. I'm really curious to see what happens when the Eagles bring the heat on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting. And I think the key to this game, Jeff, for both San Francisco and the Eagles is San Francisco cannot allow the Eagles to get off to a fast start, because if the Eagles get a lead, they force San Francisco to be a little bit one-dimensional. That's not going to be a good recipe for Brock Purdy. I mean, the key for the 49ers here to, win this game or even stay in this game, they need to control the ball. They need to make sure they're in a situation where they're not one-dimensional and don't need to just rely on throwing the football, because if the Eagles can get a lead and they can start to release the dogs, let the pressure loose, then that's going to be a really bad scenario for Brock Purdy. And the thing for the Eagles, they don't necessarily even need to blitz to get pressure with these pass rushers. If they can get you in 3rd and long situations, bad down and distance situations, they can get pressure with 4, maybe 5 at times. So I think that's a big key for the 49ers. If they want to stay in this game, they cannot fall behind.
We've really been grasping for straws this week in terms of quotable material, because it's been really calm on the Eagles' end, been really calm on the 49ers' end. They both have been, I mean, for the most part, just classy in terms of the respect for each other. But Deebo Samuel did kind of kick the hornet's nest when he said how San Francisco's louder than Philadelphia. And keep in mind, the 49ers are the only team in the NFC to never play a playoff game in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, and I think some of that is you're trying to pump up your own fan base, and Deebo Samuel's never been here for a playoff game. Like, I don't have problems with those comments necessarily, but I think they're wrong, and I think that's something that the Niners are going to figure out pretty quickly here, is that they've never been in a situation like this. And Brock Purdy said earlier this week that, he played in that Thursday night game in Seattle, and he thinks that's prepared him for this moment. It's different. Like, it's different. And I know that stadium gets loud, but Thursday night in Seattle in November, December is not the same of coming to Philadelphia for an NFC Championship game. I mean, that crowd's going to be going crazy. And, I just have a hard time believing that a young quarterback is going to react well in this spot, especially Brock Purdy, who I thought, looked like the moment got to him a little bit last week in that game against Dallas.
Do you think it's maybe us on the East Coast? We don't really get to hear enough about the West Coast home field advantages. Like, I didn't really hear about how great Seattle's fan base was. I knew that the Kingdome was always pretty loud for a playoff game, but you didn't hear how great or how loud Quest Field was until the Seahawks were making their Super Bowl runs in like the mid-2000s. And then when Russ got there, obviously they had the reputation. But Candlestick Park used to be really loud for 49ers games. And then you kind of didn't hear about 49ers fans for a long time. But now you're starting to hear like how loud Levi Stadium was. Like, do you think we just missed that because we're out here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Seattle thing has become a pretty big deal about the loudness of that stadium and how crazy it can be sometimes. But yeah, it's hard to know. It's just it seems like it's just kind of like a different culture out there out west than it is out east. Like I kind of just envision these big cities on the East Coast being the ones that have the louder fan bases, and maybe that's kind of just because these are the areas that we're able to go to and the games we're able to go to. But yeah, I mean, you've heard Dodger Stadium can be crazy sometimes, and obviously that stadium in Seattle. But I do think there's just a different feel out there than there is here in Philadelphia.
We get the, I know just from going to Rose Bowls before at Penn State, how loud it can get there. And that comes both ways from the West Coast crowd. And West Coast people, like USC people told me, it's just a different vibe out here. Like, we're not as they're not as raucous, but they're loud. Like, we could be raucous. So I guess that's where it's different. But I'm curious where 49ers fans, and I know they travel well. I have wrote tons of stories about how 49ers fans have taken over this stadium. They're like Eagles fans in a sense. I do not see them taking over Lincoln Financial Field Sunday unless they pay $1,500 a ticket.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that's going to happen. And I think what Vikings fans learned that back in 2017 when they tried to take over the stadium. It's just not going to happen, not in an NFC Championship game. So I think you'll get maybe your smattering of 49ers fans here, but that's going to be an incredibly loud stadium on Sunday. And, the 49ers may think they played in an environment like this, but I just don't think they have, whether it's in Seattle, whether it's at home. It's going to be different. And I think that's something the Eagles can certainly use their advantage.
You think it's going to be louder than 2017?
It's hard for me to say that because, I was at that game, Jeff, and that was the loudest I've ever heard a stadium. Like when Patrick Robinson intercepts that pass, takes it back for a touchdown, I've never, encountered anything that loud. So it would be a lot to match it. But from what I've heard, I wasn't there last week, but apparently the crowd against the Giants was crazy. And if that's true, then I think it's going to be, it's going to be crazier than that this weekend. There's no doubt about that.
And that's where I think people underestimate the Philadelphia fan. I have gone to my fair share of Philly sporting events. You have too, TK. When Reese Hoskins hit that home run against the Braves, it was already loud in that NLDS Game 3, but that place just went to a whole nother level after he hit that home run. It never quieted down. I tell people there are 3 moments in time where I feel like I've never heard Philadelphia louder. And keep in mind, I was at the Giants game. I covered the Giants game last week, and I thought it was really loud. The Hoskins home run, when Jimmy Butler stole the pass from Kawhi Leonard in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Wells Fargo Center was, I was shaking in the 200 level. That's where my season tickets are for that. It was shaking up there. And when Hugh Douglas sacked Sean King in the 2000 NFC wildcard round, that to me was, those are like those moments where you remember what you were doing, you remember how loud it was. I feel like a lot of Eagles fans, they have that story from the 2017 NFC Championship game when Patrick Robinson made the pick, when Torrey Smith caught the flea flicker, when Doug basically went, it's 21-3, and Doug said, you know what, we're going for it at the half. I don't care, because I don't know if you read his book, Tom, when he learned he was watching the Jaguars-Patriots game beforehand, and he said, you know what, I'm not going to be conservative. If I have the opportunity, I'm going to go for it. And he did, and I felt like the stadium was loud then. But I agree with you. It could be on another level, especially if they blow them out.
Yeah, and I was being at that game, it was incredibly loud. And the only thing I could kind of compare it to was, I was at the game, the Phillies game, Game 4, 2009, when Jimmy Rollins hits the walk-off hit. And I felt like that was the loudest I'd ever heard a stadium prior to that. The Patrick Robinson one was pretty loud, was louder as well. I was at that NLCS game this past year that you referenced as well. That was pretty crazy in the first inning. But yeah, this is just, playoff football at the Link is just something that's hard to compare. And I don't know what it's like in San Francisco. I'm not going to claim to say I do. I've never been to that stadium before, but yeah, I just think it's going to be insane. And this fan base loves the Eagles. They love these late season games. So I think it's going to be really crazy atmosphere, and something that the Eagles need to capitalize on early. And that's why I'll say this, as far as the coin toss, I know people love taking the ball, defer, put the Niners offense on the field. I know that, people like to we want to get the ball, we want to score. I get it. But this is a situation. Take advantage of that crowd, defer, put the Niners on the field, and let that defense, get some pressure right away.
I agree with you. I think I would defer in that game too. I want to ask you this because you grew up same time I grew up. Eagles fans at the Vet. The Vet was one of the most ultimate home field advantages ever. But I feel like until 2017, the Link never got that Vet vibe until that year. Do you feel like the Link now has that reputation as one of the toughest places to play in?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it was always kind of like that. Like, it obviously had a big reputation to live up to, and I think the first couple of years it was just different. It was just new, and the Eagles happened to be really good at that time and going to championship games. But let's face it, I mean, this team hasn't played a ton of home playoff games since the Link opened. Like, after the 2003, 2004, before the 2017 run, they played what, all of 3 playoff games, 6, 10, and 13, all kind of one and done situations. 06 they won, then went down to New Orleans and lost the following week. But yeah, I think it's been one of those things where there haven't been a ton of opportunities for them to play late in the season. But now that they've been there, they've kind of gotten that feel of playing late in the season. I think the Lynx starting to become a tougher place to play and a real home field advantage. I definitely think it's picked up over the last few years, though.
Where would you rank Philadelphia in terms of the home field advantages? I had to do a bunch of us writers. We get together for like Rick Gosselin runs like a poll, and he changes the topic every week. But one of the week was home field advantage. Like, what's the ultimate home field advantage? And I thought it was cool. Of his final 4, he put Kansas City, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Green Bay. And he said, if you want to mention someone else, please feel free to. And I gave my case for Philadelphia. And a lot of people seem to agree. It's like, okay, Philadelphia's already raucous with the fan base. But when the team's good, it just feels different. So where would you rank Philadelphia in terms of home field advantages?
I think it's probably got to be certainly in the top 10. I mean, maybe in the top 5, but I feel like it's a little different in football, Jeff. And I think in football, like, everywhere's loud for the most part. Like, everywhere is going to be loud when you get to the playoffs. I think it's the biggest advantage in baseball with the Phillies because that's the one where it feels truly unique. Like, that's the one where it feels like no other baseball stadium is like that. Like, and especially this past year, it was just insane because Phillies fans have been waiting so long for this team to get back to the playoffs. So I think it's more pronounced in baseball than it is in football. But overall, I mean, it's always going to be crazy here in the playoffs. And I would certainly expect that this weekend that you're going to get as loud a crowd as you could possibly get in the Link.
Are we in like this? I don't want to say it's a golden era because we haven't won anything yet, but remember 4 or 5 years ago, all we did was complain about how bad like a lot of these teams were. Like, Sixers were going through the process and before the Eagles made their Super Bowl run, and we know how bad the Phillies were, and the Flyers just couldn't get out of their own way. It does feel like now you got the Sixers, the second seed in the East, and they're scorching hot right now. They're 19-4. The Phillies are loaded, and they just came off a World Series appearance, and the Eagles are one of the best teams in football. Do you feel like that's connecting with the vibe of like how the crowd's been the last couple months?
Yeah, and I think when you get in these kind of roles like this, the crowd responds to it, and the Phillies got on such a fun run and such an unexpected run that one was pretty fun and pretty carefree. This one, I think, this is kind of unexpected as well because as much as our expectations throughout the season have changed here, this was not what many people thought the Eagles were going to be at the beginning of the year. I mean, we thought they were going to be good. Nobody thought they were going to be this good, 14-1 good with Jalen Hurts being an MVP candidate here. So I do think the fan base is riding the high of these teams being so good, and the Sixers are playing well, obviously, which is a nice addition to things here. But yeah, I mean, I think when you're on a kind of run like this, you get even the casual fans to join in, and I think ultimately that's a good thing.
Is it a disappointing season if the Eagles lose?
I would say no. Like, at this point, I would say it's not a disappointing season. Now, would it be a big missed opportunity? Yeah, it would be a big missed opportunity. Like, this team at this point, I feel like you really need to take advantage of where you are. You need to at least go to the Super Bowl. And once you get to the Super Bowl, it's kind of a different story. But for that reason, that I just talked about, of this being not what you expected this team to be at the beginning of the season, I don't think you can look back at the end and say it was a disappointment. But I do think you can look back and say it was a big missed opportunity.
If they go to a Super Bowl, don't you feel like this will be the first of kind of many in this Hurts era? Like how when Mahomes went, you kind of figured this wasn't going to be a one and done. Same with Burrow. I don't think it's going to be a one and done for him. Do you get the same feel with Jalen Hurts that they were able to win Sunday?
Yeah, you'd think so, but again, this is why I think you need to take advantage of, because you never know. I mean, you just never know. I mean, and like this is the second year with Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, and yeah, of course, we think this at this point, this is going to be the start of a great run, and they'll be back and they'll be contention year after year. But 5 years ago, we would have said the exact same thing about the Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz tandem. Now, I don't think Jalen's Carson Wentz. I don't think his career is going to go the way Carson's gone here. But it just shows that there are no guarantees. I mean, who would have thought after 2010, when Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl, that would be the last Super Bowl he would play in? It's just it's not the type of thing where you can rely on going back. I mean, typically the only coaches that go to Super Bowls regularly or and play deep into the playoffs are Belichick and Andy Reid, and the only quarterbacks that go regularly are really Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. So it's gonna be a challenge to get back, and that's why if the Eagles, don't take advantage here and don't at least get to the Super Bowl, yeah, you'd hope they'll be back. And I think they will play deep into the playoffs most years, but you just never know with the NFL and the way rosters turn over and injuries, stuff like that. You just never know.
That's what's very interesting to me, Tom, because the Chiefs are the prime example, right? They won in the 2019 season. You're like, okay, they're going to be back. They're going to be really good. They lose in 2020. I mean, they've hosted 5 straight AFC Championship games, and they only have one Super Bowl to show for it. I wish people would understand. It's hard to win a Super Bowl. Like, I like to get on Aaron Rodgers as much as anybody else, but to peg a guy like that as a loser who has a championship, I'm sorry. I can't buy that. Same with Dan Marino. Like, I know he doesn't have a championship, but how good have the Dolphins really been since he left? You know?
Right. Yeah. And I would agree. And it's hard. And I think a guy like Rodgers, I'd agree with you. I mean, it's the fact that he's gotten some of those teams as deep as he's gotten them, most years has been pretty impressive. Now, do they have disappointing playoff losses? Yeah, they do. I mean, the 2020 NFC Championship game was a bad loss, even though you're going against the Bucks and Brady. That's a game Packers should have won last year in the playoffs as well. But yeah, it's hard. And that's what makes the NFL playoffs so unique and so special, is that it is one and done. Like, you're not playing these long series. It's not a situation where, okay, we had a bad day, we'll go get them tomorrow. You have a bad day, and that's your season. So, it just makes it even that much more important to take advantage of it while you're here.
It's so weird, too, how we have 4 quarterbacks under 28 that are in the conference championship game. This is the first time we're getting this since 96. And again, I remember the 96 playoff pretty well, more toward the Eagles than nationally. Like, I knew the Packers were really good at the time, and they had Brett Favre and Reggie White and stuff, but Favre was a young gun. Drew Bledsoe, I thought, would go to multiple Super Bowl. He did in a sense, but not as a starting quarterback. But, Kerry Collins looked like he was on the upswing there. I'm trying to remember who the Patriots are. Oh, Mark Brunell. That's right. They beat the Jaguars. And you thought all these guys would kind of make Super Bowl runs of their own. And really, none of them won after that. Well, Bledsoe did, but he wasn't the starter. It's weird, though, how the narrative shifts, because we keep thinking Mahomes is going to get one, and Burrow's going to get one, Hurts is going to get one. So that's why I agree with you, TK. You just can't take this stuff for granted.
No, you can't, and there's just like there are just no guarantees, and it's crazy. But even a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he's played in the championship game every year of his career so far that he's been a starter, and he's only won one Super Bowl. Like, it's very difficult to do. And it's very difficult with roster turnover. And let's face it, for the Eagles, they're going to have roster turnover. I mean, Jalen is going to get paid. That's going to make it more difficult for the Eagles to, build this roster and build as strong as a roster, and they're going to lose some guys. So, this is the last time that this team, as it's configured, is going to have an opportunity, and they need to take advantage of it now.
If Andy Reid loses Sunday, that'll be a 7th loss in the conference championship game. He already holds the record for most conference championship game losses, which is actually kind of impressive considering how many he's been in. But does that affect his legacy at all if he loses to the Bengals this week?
In my mind, no. I mean, in my mind, Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in NFL history. And I talked about this a little bit last night on the radio as well. I hate to do this, but I'm in a situation where I'm going to be rooting against Andy on Sunday. I mean, if the Eagles win, if the Eagles lose, then I'll be rooting for him. But if the Eagles win, I don't want to play Andy in the Super Bowl. I wouldn't want to be in that situation where it's Eagles versus Andy. And, I know the storyline would be fun and people would love it. But, because what the story would be if the Eagles were to beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, it'd be like Andy's a loser and the Eagles beat him. And I get that you could say, okay, well, losing in the championship doesn't make it any better. But I just don't want to be in a situation where the Eagles are playing against Andy Reid. And honestly, I think it's another championship game loss for Andy. Honestly, I think the Bengals win this game. I think the Bengals are getting hot at the right time. And, that win against the Bills last week was really impressive. And I think the Bengals probably go into Kansas City and win that game.
Yeah, and I picked Kansas City to win, but I keep looking at it as too. This Bengals team's legit. They are legit good. Like, if they go to the Super Bowl, it's more than well deserved. I just don't know if they could beat Kansas City 4 straight times. And I actually think Kansas City is a better team this year than they were last year. And it doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, and what Patrick Mahomes has done this year with, after taking Tyreek Hill off that team is really impressive. I think they're both really good teams. And I think that AFC Championship game is going to be a really interesting one to watch. And I think, just the fact that both those teams are able to get back there, not often you see, rematches in conference championship games because it is so difficult. And I think that just speaks to how good both those teams are.
Now, an Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl would be fun, though, just because of, like you said, the Andy narrative. And I know that could get ugly, especially considering, you work for WIP, where it seems like Andy Reid is the vein of all existence here. But how about the new Heights Bowl with Jason, Travis Kelce? We got to get, if that happens, those two have to get in a room and just answer questions from everybody in the media.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. It would be fun. And for a storyline perspective, it would be incredible. It's just one of those things, like, it feels like too good to be true, like it's not going to happen. It's why I didn't think ultimately the Cowboys and Eagles will play in the championship game, because it's like, this is too good of a storyline. Something's going to throw it off. And I think what's going to throw it off is the Bengals. But yeah, I mean, if they were to play in the Super Bowl, that would be amazing.
It would be weird, though, to see an Eagles-Bengals Super Bowl. 49ers-Bengals seems more sense because it's happened twice, but Eagles-Bengals, it's like, the Bengals, really? Like, we can't get, anybody fun. At least if the Eagles go, they won't be in, like, the 2 worst Super Bowl cities to ever exist in Jacksonville and Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really, really weird to see those two teams end up playing in a Super Bowl. But I mean, I think people got to, and it's one of those things where you got to like reprogram your brain because you're used to the Bengals being bad for so long. But this is obviously not a fluke. Like, Joe Burrow's that good, and I think we got to get used to the Bengals being a team we watch play late in the season.
I think that's why, too, like, if the 49ers would go, they played the Chiefs in a Super Bowl, which was one of the better Super Bowls, I think, in the last couple of years. And they played the Bengals twice in a Super Bowl, and they almost played the Bengals in a Super Bowl. I still think it's funny how the 49ers and Bengals could have met for the 3rd time in the Super Bowl last year. And that's the only team the Bengals have ever played in a Super Bowl before they played the Rams.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy. And obviously, it was a while for the Bengals before they made it last year. But man, I mean, they're going to be in it every year, I think, playing deep. And Joe Burrow is really fun to watch. And I think regardless of who the Eagles would meet if they get to the Super Bowl, it's going to be a tough matchup.
Do you think Joe Burrow kind of has that Jalen Hurts like swag to him? Like, it's a different type of swag because Joe Burrow's got that cool, calm, confidence look, while Jalen's like, he's got that Kobe Bryant mentality, like, whatever you have today, or like what Dawkins says, whatever you have today, I gotta have it. Like, it's just a different mentality, but it works for both of them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, I think Burrow got a lot of that from his time in college, and he was so successful at LSU that year that he's kind of carried that over in the pros. And he's a guy I really enjoy watching. I enjoy the confidence that he plays with and the way he plays the game. It's a fun guy to watch.
Now, if the Chiefs were to win Sunday and they happen with they happen to, really it doesn't matter who they play at that point. If the Chiefs were to win, do you think Mahomes needs that second Super Bowl to kind of get rid of that? Oh, he's what did we call him a couple years ago? The baby goat when he was facing Brady.
Yeah.
Do you think he needs like that to kind of get that baby goat mentality or that legacy back?
In my mind, no. Like, in my mind, Patrick Mahomes, I mean, with what he did this year, like, as much as I think Jalen Hurts has had a great year, I think Mahomes should win the MVP just because of what he's done without Tyreek Hill this year. But I don't think so. But you know the way people are in media, and the ideas can change really quickly. And if Mahomes loses in the championship game or in a Super Bowl, people will jump on top and label him a choker. I don't think that's right, but that's in a lot of senses the way that it goes. So I don't think so, but I think in many cases, in many people's minds, they do think he needs to do that.
Now with the 49ers, win or lose this game, does it feel like Brock Purdy's going to be a starter for this team next year?
It's kind of trending in that direction. I don't think it's going to be Trey Lance. I'll say that. I think he tweeted about the Niners front office guy who got a job somewhere else in Tennessee and about potentially going there. I don't think that Trey Lance will be back. I don't think it'll be Jimmy Garoppolo either. They clearly didn't want Jimmy Garoppolo to be the guy to start this year anyway. So I think it's trending in that direction. But I mean, I also think John Lynch is a smart GM, and I think he's going to investigate his options. And if they can go a different direction, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe they think they're so well built, and if they lose in the championship game, they need a quarterback get over the hump. Maybe they go after Brady. I mean, maybe they look to get in the quarterback market like for a Derek Carr. I kind of doubt it, but I'd say if you were placing odds right now, I'd say Brock Purdy definitely be the favorite.
Before I let you go, TK, I got to ask you this. Would you fear the 49ers more if Jimmy Garoppolo was starting Sunday than Brock Purdy?
It's a good question. I think it would be about equal, honestly. I think Purdy's played about how Jimmy Garoppolo would play. Like, if Garoppolo was the quarterback, I still think the Niners would be here. I still think they would have done what they did in the rest of the regular season. I still think they would have beaten the teams that they beat in the playoffs. So I don't know if I'd fear them more. It probably wouldn't be less, though. So yeah, I think it's pretty much a wash at quarterback between those two.
And finally, who do you got both games?
I like the Eagles. I made my prediction already on WIP. I'm going 34-13. I think the Eagles get on top early, and I think, it's going to be maybe a closer game than the score indicates, but I think they add on late, and I think they win big. And then the other game, I'm going the Bengals. I'll say 34-24. I think the Bengals have a big day offensively. I think Burrow has a big game, and I think they go into Arrowhead and win again.
You're smart. You didn't pull a U-Ram. I didn't want to see an egg fall on your head, TK.
Yeah, well, I'm not picking against the Eagles in this game. I mean, in the Super Bowl, you're going against top quarterbacks. Maybe that's a different story. But, Jeff, I mean, it boils down to this. Brock Purdy's not coming to Philadelphia and win an NFC Championship game. It's just not going to happen.
No, I agree with you. Rookie quarterbacks just don't go to the Super Bowl. If they do, I'll eat it up on Monday morning. I'll just say, hey, look, congrats to Brock Purdy. But I think for the sake of the NFL, we need a Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes / Joe Burrow Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. No doubt about it.
All right. Once again, TK, thanks for coming on. Good Morning NFC East. I'll try to get you on next week, man. I'm just hoping we get 2 more weeks of fun Eagles coverage.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it sounds great. Tom Kelly, everybody. And I don't have a lot of time here, but I will give my prediction as well. Obviously, I think you guys know where I'm going to lean here. I am going to go Eagles 27, 49ers 19. I just don't see Brock Purdy winning in Philadelphia either. I love this 49ers team. I love watching them. There's a lot of guys on this team I like. Tone's going 31-21 Eagles, by the way. I cannot wait to see Deebo Samuel in person. That's just my opinion. I love watching Deebo Samuel. I love watching Nick Bosa and that defense. But I think the Eagles just have weapons across the board. And AFC, I think you guys know where I'm leaning to. I'm going to go Kansas City. I think Kansas City wins 30-27. So those are my predictions. Again, feel free to drop them in the chat room here. But we got Birds365, Joe McDonald, John McMullen coming up next. Plenty of Eagles coverage from those guys. Once again, thanks for tuning in to Good Morning NFC East. Thanks to Tom Kelly, Tone DeShields, everybody else that has contributed to the program this week. You guys have a good day and you have a good weekend.